2 months ago, my wife drove to Knoxville to help our son and his new wife settle into their house. She planned to stay for 2 weeks. After 4 days, she stopped answering my calls. On the 5th day, I got into my truck and drove the 3 hours myself. When I stepped out of the cab, an old man I had never met walked straight toward me from across the street. He pointed a finger at me and said, "You need to call an ambulance right now before you go into that house." I spent 31 years as a homicide detective in Nashville. I knew what fear looked like on a man's face. This man was terrified, so I called 911 before I reached the front door. Nothing in my life was ever the same after that call. My name is Daniel Mercer. My wife, Helen, and I had been married for 41 years. She had driven to Knoxville to help our only son, Ryan, and his new wife, Lauren, settle into their new home. Helen had planned to stay for 2 weeks. She was excited about it. Ryan had recently moved into a better house, and Helen wanted to help unpack, organize the kitchen, and make the place feel like home. The first night, she called me happy. "Big kitchen," she said. "The backyard backs onto a creek. Ryan is really glad I'm here." The next morning, at 7:14, I received her usual text, "Good morning, Daniel." She had sent me some version of that message almost every morning for years. Then the following morning, nothing came. I called. No answer. I called Ryan. "Mom's just tired from the move," he said. "She'll call when she wakes up." She never did. The next morning, there was still nothing. By the 4th day, I was already loading a bag into my truck. The drive took longer than it should have, because I kept stopping at gas stations with the engine running, telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe Helen's phone was dead. Maybe she had left it in another room. After 41 years of marriage, she could still forget to charge the thing. But 4 days of silence was not like Helen. Not even close. The only time she had ever missed her morning message was when she had gallbladder surgery years earlier. Even then, she had texted me from recovery before the anesthesia had completely worn off. Something was wrong. Ryan was our only child. He had been born the same year I made detective. Helen had raised him through the years when I was buried in homicide cases, working nights and coming home with my mind still trapped in somebody else's tragedy. Ryan had always been a good kid. Smart, charming, easy to talk to. He worked in finance and had followed a promotion to Knoxville 18 months earlier. That was where he met Lauren. I liked Lauren at first. She was sharp, ambitious, and seemed to understand a room the second she entered it. They married quickly, maybe too quickly, but Helen told me I was being an overprotective father, so I let it go. Then Ryan began to change. About 6 months after the wedding, his calls stopped being about fishing or football. They became about money. The house needed repairs. Lauren's car needed a transmission. His bonus structure had been changed. Then, 8 weeks before Helen's trip, Ryan had been standing in my garage while I worked on the truck. My hands were covered in oil when he casually asked whether I had thought about updating my beneficiary designations. Lauren, he explained, had training in estate planning. She would be happy to help us review everything. "We're fine, son," I told him. He smiled, but the question stayed with me. That night, I mentioned it to Helen. She gave me the patient smile she used whenever she thought 31 years of homicide work had made me suspicious of shadows. "He's just being thoughtful," she said. Maybe, or maybe 3 decades of interviewing killers had taught me to notice when a question was not really a question. It had not felt thoughtful. It had felt like reconnaissance. Ryan's house was a 2-story colonial with white shutters, nicer than a man with a recently restructured bonus should have been able to afford. I parked at the curb. For a moment, I told myself Helen would open the door laughing at me. She would tell me her phone had died, and that I had driven 3 hours for nothing. Then the old man crossed the street. "You related to the woman in that house?" he asked. "She's my wife. Daniel Mercer." Walter Hayes. He did not waste time on pleasantries. 3 days ago, I saw her through the front window. She was sitting at the kitchen table. Couldn't hold her head up. Then she slid right out of the chair onto the floor. My stomach tightened. I called across to your son, Walter continued. He told me she'd had too much wine at dinner, but I watched for another hour. Nobody helped her up, so I called 911. I stared at him. Your son got to the door before the paramedics did. He told them she'd had a reaction to some new medication and that they had already spoken to her doctor. He signed something. The ambulance left. Walter looked toward the house. The curtains have been shut ever since. Yesterday I knocked. Your son told me my concern wasn't appreciated. The 911 dispatcher answered before Walter finished speaking. I gave the address and explained that my wife had been unresponsive inside the house 3 days earlier. Then I walked to the front door. Ryan answered. He was 34. My height. Helen's coloring. He looked at me like my arrival was an inconvenience. Dad, he said, I didn't know you were coming. Where is she? Upstairs, resting. She hasn't been answering her phone. She's been sleeping. I walked past him. Dad. I found Helen in the guest room. She was under blankets pulled to her chin. The color of old chalk. She looked smaller than she had 3 weeks earlier, as if something had been slowly draining out of her. I turned on the lamp. Her eyes opened. They found my face. And the relief in them was the worst thing I had ever seen, because it meant she had been waiting. Daniel, she whispered, something's wrong with me. Ryan appeared in the doorway. She's just sleeping it off. It's a bad reaction to. Don't. I used the voice I had used in interrogation rooms for 3 decades. The one that did not invite argument. Don't say another word. The paramedics arrived 8 minutes later. Helen had low blood pressure. Her pupils were sluggish. When the young paramedic asked what medications she normally took, I listed them. She and her partner exchanged a look. Professionals communicating without words. They loaded Helen onto the stretcher. Ryan and Lauren did not follow. 2 hours later, a heavyset emergency room doctor at the University of Tennessee Medical Center took me into a quiet room. Your wife has a significant amount of benzodiazepines in her system, he said. My mind went cold. More than prescribed use could explain. These drugs appear to have accumulated over several days. She also shows signs of inadequate nutrition. She isn't prescribed benzodiazepines. We confirmed that. He paused. If she had gone another day without intervention, we would be having a very different conversation. Who knew she was staying with you? He asked. My son. His wife. Will need to contact law enforcement. I looked at him. I spent 31 years in law enforcement. Then I said, make the call. Helen was moved to the ICU. Around 2 in the morning, she woke enough to talk. The tea, she whispered. What tea? Lauren made me chamomile every night before bed. With honey. I didn't think anything about it. She closed her eyes briefly. The second night, I fell asleep at the table. Ryan helped me upstairs. The next morning, my legs wouldn't work right. She began to cry quietly. Then it felt like I was underwater. I could hear things, but I couldn't respond. I held her hand. I tried to tell Ryan something was wrong, she said. Then she looked directly at me. He patted my hand and told me to sleep. Our son, my son. He had patted his mother's hand and told her to sleep. The next morning, Detective Sergeant Patricia Warren from the Knox County Sheriff's Office took my statement. I told her everything. Ryan's questions about our estate, the 4 days of silence, Walter's account, the nightly tea. When I finished, she asked, did Ryan and Lauren know your wife was in the hospital? I called Ryan from the ambulance. What did he say? He said he hoped she felt better. That afternoon, they came to the hospital. I watched them from the hallway before they saw me. Lauren was speaking quietly. Ryan nodded. Their movements had the controlled rhythm of 2 people rehearsing a story. Ryan hugged me. We had no idea she was that sick. he said. Lauren touched my arm. The doctors found sedatives in her system, I said. High doses. She wasn't prescribed any. Silence. Lauren finally spoke. Could she have accidentally taken something from our medicine cabinet? She drank tea every night. Another pause. Chamomile, Lauren said. With honey. You made it. I was just trying to help her sleep. Did you put anything in it? Of course not. I watched her eyes. 31 years as a detective had taught me something important. People often told you the truth with their faces before they found the words to lie. That evening, I called an old friend named Marcus Reed, a former federal investigator who now specialized in forensic financial investigations. Pull everything you can on Ryan and Lauren, I told him. Finances, debts, assets, the last 18 months. 2 days later, he called me in the hospital cafeteria. Your son is in serious trouble, he said. Ryan had taken a $60,000 personal loan connected to a client financial product. His firm was investigating him. There were $45,000 in additional private loans, maxed out credit cards, more than $120,000 in combined debt. Then Marcus told me the rest. 6 weeks before Helen's visit, Lauren had contacted a life insurance company and asked hypothetical questions about claim payout timelines and beneficiary requirements, specifically regarding Helen's policy. Helen had a $400,000 life insurance policy, combined with my pension and the retirement accounts. Ryan had already shown interest in. The amount would have covered their debts. They had not planned to inherit. They had planned to collect. I gave everything to Sergeant Warren. The financial records, the insurance inquiry, the timeline, the tea, the neighbor's eyewitness account. The investigators had already subpoenaed pharmacy records and sent Helen's tea mug to the laboratory. Ryan and Lauren were ordered not to leave Knoxville. Helen improved every day. She began walking again. She started eating properly. Color slowly returned to her face. Walter visited on the 4th day with a bag of oranges. He was a retired 7th grade history teacher. 38 years in Knox County. A widower for 4 years. He and Helen talked for an hour. I wasn't sure anyone would believe me, Walter told me afterward. An old man looking through his neighbor's window. But he had trusted what he saw. 11 days after Helen was admitted, Sergeant Warren called. The laboratory had found a high concentration of crushed alprazolam in the tea mug. The pills had been ground fine enough to dissolve without leaving an obvious trace. Investigators traced them to an online pharmacy. The order had been placed 5 weeks before Helen's visit, under Lauren's name. It had been shipped to a P.O. box registered to her. Then came the search history from Lauren's laptop. Questions about how much Xanax could cause unconsciousness, how long alprazolam remained in the body, whether untreated sedation could become fatal. The evidence showed weeks of planning. Warrants were issued. Ryan and Lauren were arrested the next morning. I watched 30 seconds of the arrest footage on the local news from Helen's hospital room. Ryan's head was down. Lauren stared straight ahead. Don't look if you don't want to, I told Helen. I want to. So she watched it all. The legal battle that followed was ugly. Their attorney went on local television and began building a different story. Helen, they claimed, had secretly been self-medicating. Ryan and Lauren had supposedly been trying to help her. Lauren's internet searches were described as concerned research. We love Helen, Lauren said during one interview. This is devastating. I had seen that strategy work in courtrooms for years. You did not always have to prove innocence. Sometimes all you had to do was manufacture uncertainty. I did not argue with them in public. Instead, my attorney filed a civil lawsuit. We laid out everything in documents: the insurance inquiry, the pharmacy order, the search history, the financial motive. Their assets were frozen. Ryan called me 2 days later. You're going to destroy us, he said. Your mother is 20 feet from where I'm standing, I told him, in physical therapy because of what was done to her. Dad, she was going to die. You knew that. Silence. You watched it happen and made sure help didn't come. That's something you did. Now you're going to answer for it. I hung up. 6 weeks after the arrests, the case broke apart from the inside. Ryan and Lauren were separated for questioning again. Their stories began to diverge. Small inconsistencies. The kind that appear when two people memorize the same script, but not each other's exact lines. Prosecutors offered Ryan a cooperation deal. Lauren learned about it and immediately hired separate counsel. Her new defense claimed Ryan had controlled her throughout the marriage and that she had participated because she was afraid of him. Ryan found out. 48 hours later, he took the deal. His deposition lasted 7 hours. He said the plan had originated with Lauren after he told her about Helen's insurance policy during an argument over their debt. He described her researching sedatives, ordering the alprazolam, crushing the pills, dissolving them in Helen's tea. Then he described standing outside the guest room and hearing his mother say she did not feel right. He admitted he had told himself somebody would help her eventually. 28 years old, still telling himself things. With Ryan's testimony, the lab results, financial records, search history, Walter's eyewitness account, and Helen's own statement, Lauren had little defense left. The jury took less than 5 hours. Guilty on every count: attempted murder, conspiracy, elder abuse, criminal poisoning. At sentencing, the judge said Lauren had purchased a sedative specifically to incapacitate a woman who trusted her as family, administered it over multiple days, watched that woman lose the ability to stand or call for help, and helped prevent first responders from intervening. Helen was alive only because a retired school teacher across the street trusted his own eyes. Lauren received 24 years, with 20 before parole eligibility. Ryan's negotiated sentence was 8 years, eligible for parole after 6. I sat in that courtroom and tried to understand what I felt. Anger seemed too simple. Grief was closer. But grief suggested I had lost my son suddenly. The truth was that I had probably lost him gradually, somewhere in the months before this happened, during a change I had failed to recognize until it was already complete. Mostly, I felt tired. Helen grew stronger through physical therapy. Her memory issues mostly resolved, though occasionally a word would disappear and take a moment to return. She did not attend either sentencing. "I've seen enough," she said. We drove home to Nashville on a clear February morning. About an hour into the drive, Helen turned from the window. "Do you think Ryan is sorry?" I thought for a long moment. "I think he's sorry it didn't work." She was quiet. "Sometimes I think about the little boy who brought me dandelions from the backyard and called them flowers," she said. "That boy must still be in there somewhere. He might be." She looked back out the window. Then I think about lying on that floor, not being able to reach my phone. I reached over and held her hand for the rest of the drive. Before leaving Knoxville, we visited Walter with a pound cake Helen had baked. He showed us photographs of his late wife, a music teacher. He asked me questions about my years as a homicide detective, the kind that came from genuine curiosity. As we left, he admitted he had not been sure anyone would come after the ambulance had been turned away. He had watched that house for days, wondering whether what he had seen would matter. "Somebody ought to be sure," I told him. He hugged Helen carefully. We later wrote him a 4-page letter, and he wrote back 3 times. That spring, Helen and I rewrote our wills. Our money would go to the University of Tennessee's nursing program, a Nashville food bank, where Helen had volunteered for 15 years, and a new scholarship fund for education students established in Walter Hayes's name. Not a dollar would go to Ryan. Not a dollar to anyone who came after him. What they had tried to kill for would go somewhere. It could become something good. Last month, A letter arrived in Ryan's handwriting, the same slant of his capital letters he had used since grade school. I sat with it unopened for 10 minutes. 4 pages, an apology, explanations, blame placed on Lauren, on the debt, on a version of himself he claimed no longer existed. At the end, he asked whether there was any path back to something between us. I read it twice. I thought about the boy with the dandelions. Then I thought about Helen lying on the floor, unable to reach a phone only 10 feet away. I thought about 31 years of sitting across from people who had done terrible things and built elaborate explanations for why those things were not really their fault. I had heard every version of that story. I folded the letter back into the envelope. Then I took it inside and fed it through the shredder. Some things you grieve, some things you simply close the door on. You do not stand there, listening for a sound from the other side. You walk away, you hold tight to what you still have, and you let that be enough. Helen was in the kitchen when I came back inside, stirring the soup she had made every winter of our marriage. She looked up. After 41 years, she knew exactly where that letter had come from. "Okay?" she asked. "I'm okay." She went back to the stove. I sat at the table and watched her move through that kitchen while the stars appeared one by one over Nashville. The soup smelled like every winter we had survived together. And for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. I had protected what needed protecting. I had held on to what was still worth holding. Helen was alive. She was beside me. That was enough. That was more than enough.